Welcome to the Sean Chandler Talks About Movies podcast, where I, Sean Chandler, talk about movies. Today is August 31st, 2017, and this is the second episode of the show, so I'm still trying to figure things out a little bit. Actually, I recorded this episode over the span of 2 different days in 3 different locations, so it could be a little bit interesting, but hopefully it all flow together nice and smoothly. We've got some great topics for the day. First up, Joss Whedon has been given official writing credit on Justice League. Then we're going to talk about how Suicide Squad 2 has been delayed. And then from there, we're going to go into some Q&A. You guys asked some great questions. We're going to talk a little bit about why so many anime adaptations don't work. We're going to talk about where I would kind of rank the Marvel Netflix shows amongst the MCU and a couple more things as well. But I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So be sure, if you're over on YouTube, comment on the comment section. Follow me on Twitter. My handle is @KirkNeverDied. Tweet me over there. Give me your thoughts on every subject that we discuss on here. I'd love to get a nice, lively discussion going on. Just so you know, this podcast, the one you're listening to right now, is designed to be a podcast in the audio format. I am putting it over on YouTube without any video to it. I'm not filming these at all. But this one's designed to be the audio podcast through iTunes and everything like that. But I've also got ranking videos that are kind of longer, 30-minute ranking videos that I've been doing for a while. I'm doing those podcasts as well. Those are designed to be videos. So if you're joining me for the first time on the podcast, that's why those ones are a little bit different. There's images and stuff designed to kind of go along with it. And you can see my pretty blue eyes if you watch those ones over there. With all that said, let's go ahead and start talking about movies. So the first big story we are going to talk about is that as of yesterday, it is official. Joss Whedon will be getting writing credit for Justice League. Now, there's not any way to understate how huge of a deal this is. Because they set out to make this movie a couple years back. They shot primary photography over a year ago. So much so that they were able to actually put out a mini trailer type thing at Comic-Con a year and a month ago. So that's how far ago they shot this movie. And then less than 6 months ago, they go to do reshoots and needed someone to work on the script. Joss Whedon comes in. There's some tragedy. Turns over Joss Whedon's going to actually be taking over directing this movie. And the amount that he rewrote the script after principal photography warranted him getting screenwriting credit. And here's the thing about this, is that the screenwriting credit is incredibly strictly regulated. It's not the sort of thing where you have like a gentleman's agreement, like, hey man, we want to honor Zach, so he's going to get directing credit, but everyone knows you finished directing it. We'll give you screenwriting credit because you had a big hand, like, let's just kind of shake on it and be good. It's not like that at all. It's not like you can just cut a deal with someone to give them a screenwriting credit. You can do that with producing credits, executive producing credits. Those are kind of like, you can throw those around. They're very loose terms. But the Screenwriting Guild it's very tightly regulated who actually gets credit. And it goes into arbitration, and I've listened to the Script Notes podcast a lot. It's from John August, who's done a lot of scripts for like Tim Burton movies, and Craig Mazin, who's done a couple of the Hangover movies. Less respected of a screenwriter, but very, in regards to how well his movies are received. He's a very professional, respected screenwriter that knows what he's talking about. But he does kind of like these lowbrow comedies, and so people kind of chuckle at him. But he's a legit working screenwriter that's very involved in the arbitration process, and they've talked about the arbitration process extensively on there. And scripts get submitted, and it's kind of like double blind type. People read through every version of the script to decide who gets credit on screen. And that's why you can hear all these stories about people ghostwriting and doing a last minute rewrite, but they don't have credit for all of that because you have to rewrite a lot of the script to get credit. It's a big deal if you actually get credit for a late rewrite. That's why when they say that Joss Whedon is actually getting screenwriting credit on it, that's not just like, oh, let's throw him a bone because he's directing it. We'll give him that credit and give Zach the other one. No, this means that people, like, there was almost certainly went to arbitration. They looked at the script that they had when they shot the movie, and then they looked at what was the final product of what this movie's looking to be, and they went, oh, no, he wrote an amount on it. So what I'm looking right now is you have to have written 33% of the script, is kind of what I'm reading in my quick research right now, which is to say, after they did principal photography, at least 1/3 of the script was rewritten by Whedon and reshot in the reshoots. Which isn't surprising given all the rumors, all the speculation, everything we thought was going to happen. But it's confirmed that an incredibly large percentage of this movie has been remade since Joss Whedon has come in. Not just some pickup shots, not just a couple things here or there, not adding a couple jokes. A substantial, at least 1/3 of this movie is different. And I hope someday they make a documentary about this movie. What happened? What transpired? What was different? What was the movie going to be? What did they set out to make versus what I would love to see that documentary. Won't happen for a while. But when that movie or documentary gets made, I would love to see that. I love this kind of thing. The closest example of something like this that I can think of in totally different situations would be Superman 2. Where they originally set out to shoot Superman 1 and 2 side by side, and they shot like 70-80% of Superman 2 while they were shooting Superman 1. Then, because of time constraints and budget stuff, they told Richard Donner, just shoot and finish Superman 1, and then we'll come back and we'll grab our favorite elements, this big ending of Superman 2, put it on Superman 1, we'll just finish this one and see what happens. So after they did Superman 1, they fired Richard Donner because they didn't like him, and he did not get along very well with the producers. So, after that happens, they hire a different director to finish Superman 2, but they've already shot 80% of the movie. So then what happens is they have to rewrite elements of it, put a new ending on it, put a new beginning on it, so that this new director guy has shot over 50% of the movie. So that meant that they threw out 30-40% of what Richard Donner had done just so they could make new stuff. So then what ended up happening about 10 years ago is they put out this version of the movie called the Richard Donner Cut that's a radically different version of the movie while still being the same movie. And that's the closest example of something like this I've ever seen, or that I'm aware of, where there's two radically different versions of the same movie where both guys shot massive amounts of it. And I would love to someday see the Zack Snyder cut of this and a documentary about the whole thing. It's absolutely fascinating to me. But what about you guys? Chime in on the YouTube version of this in the comments section. Tweet me. What are your thoughts on Joss Whedon actually getting writing credit? Because that is huge, and it is extraordinarily telling about the reshoots and what has actually transpired over the last few months. All right, second story of the day. The rumor mill is telling us that it looks like Suicide Squad 2 won't even start shooting until fall 2018 due to Will Smith's busy schedule. Yeah, I'm sure that's what the problem is. And the problem isn't that you can't get a director, you can't get a writer, you don't have a clear direction. I mean, this is one of those stories that was like, didn't we kind of know this was coming? There just hasn't been anything concrete with this project, like everything else with the DCU. The announcement, undone it, different news story related but disconnected to it. There's just so many different stories surrounding all of these DC projects that it just seems like it's a madhouse over here. So the idea that this is being delayed, not surprising. That their reason is that Will Smith is too busy. Now that's true. He's working on stuff, and he's got Aladdin coming up. I mean, I'd be more likely to think that he's kind of filling up his schedule to try and force a delay on their end till they can get their act together, because, you know, he hadn't done a big blockbuster in a while. I mean, he kind of slowed down from doing as many projects as he used to do, and then he kind of starts to do this big comeback. Takes a role in an ensemble film like Suicide Squad, and then the movie is just trashed by critics, not well received by the fans, but it does really good at the box office. I mean, it made way more money than you would have thought Suicide Squad the movie would make. But just as kind of a reputation thing, his name is kind of attached to something that's not so great. So I'm imagining he's not thrilled about that. He's a smart guy. He knows the reception to the movie. So I imagine it's more likely that he's trying to fill his schedule to avoid being a part of it. But beyond that, I mean, Like Mel Gibson was going to be the guy, then they said it was going to be the guy that did The Shallows, and then that fell apart, and then they have a short list, but that's not coming together. There's just so many rumors, and just even with last week, all the talk about, well, we're going to do a Joker and Harley Quinn movie, Gotham Sirens may or may not be still on, we got the Joker origin movie. So it's just kind of a madhouse over there. So the idea it's delayed, duh. That's not surprising at all. Their reasoning, pretty good cover story. Maybe it's kind of true, but seems like the real issue here is that they just don't have a clear vision. They don't have a clear direction. So they're not going to attract the talent that they want to be able to attract. Whereas when they did the first one, they might have just been able to say, hey, here's what... They pitched the vision of it. Like, we're doing our version of this dark story. But it's kind of like how Guardians of the Galaxy worked for Marvel, kind of out of nowhere, this ensemble of people together. That's what we're going to do. So suddenly they're able to attract talent, but the end result is not what Guardians of the Galaxy was. It was the risk didn't pay off. It was a mess. And so I'm imagining they're struggling quite a bit to be able to attract the talent like they did before. So that's my take on it. Not really surprising. All right, let's move on to some Q&A. If you want to send me a question, post it on any of my videos on YouTube, tweet it at me. I'll read it, and hopefully I can answer your question in a future episode. Our first question is going to be a patron-submitted question from Adam Daly. He's got a YouTube channel, Almost Sideways. Head on over there, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Here's his question. With the recent poor reception of films like Ghost in the Shell and Death Note based on very popular anime and mangas, why do you think they are so hard to adapt? Well, I think it comes down to what's going on here, which is to say that Hollywood is constantly looking for pre-existing properties with built-in audiences that have some brand name recognition that they can easily market to people, but at the same time, they're wanting to run it through the Hollywood machine. So they're saying, hey, that story that worked great in 1995, that anime that worked great, people loved it, I want that for my people too, but I don't quite want what you guys did. I want to change it and filter it through our machine, put our shine, our gloss, tell things the way we tell things. In which case, inherently, you're kind of rolling the dice as to whether you're going to take off the elements that people love about the property or whether you are going to just be able to nicely adapt it over. And I think with the nature of anime and shifting from an Asian culture to Americanize it, that's a pretty hard transition most of the time, specifically with these types of stories because they are kind of hard sci-fi, fantasy, what you would call Death Note, but they're stories that were made at a certain point in time for a specific culture based off certain ideas of what a hero is, certain ideas that kind of appeal to that certain culture and a weirdness to them that was distinct to that culture that appeals to a certain group of people. And now they're trying to market that to Americans that view heroism a different way, that find a lot of that stuff kind of weird. Like, I'm not really big into anime because a lot of the stuff doesn't naturally appeal to me because it just sounded weird. And that's just based off my personal preference. That's not like cultural judgment or anything like that, but it just wasn't something that naturally I drifted towards, even though I'm into sci-fi and a lot of the sorts of ideas in this. So like last night, I actually put on the anime of Death Note. It's on Netflix. I think it's 37 episodes or something. I got through the first 4. And it's weird because it's in a lot of ways very similar to the movie we got. And in a lot of ways, it's radically different. And it comes down to certain things that they did to try and smooth out the edges, make the lead character more relatable. So in the anime, pretty clear that Light, the lead character, is kind of a sociopath with a god complex right out of the gate. He thinks that he can do things, and it doesn't try and rationalize it. He's just like that. Whereas in the American version, they make him a high school kid that's kind of normal and finds it and has a girlfriend, and it's about their relationship as they go on this journey together with this notebook and trying to solve problems. And it puts like this YA treatment over the thing to make him more relatable, and there's a girl in his life, and he's got a dad that doesn't understand him. You know, it's all this stuff that's very cliche, very typical American type story that's just not in the original. And so the whole flavor of the thing shifted because they tried to Americanize it, and it took away from what made the original kind of work, which was at the center of it, it was like this two smart people trying to outsmart each other in Light and L battling to stop each other. Whereas the American version turns into this story about a guy and his girl trying to stop the problems in the world, and police are trying to catch them. So those are two different types of stories, and that's where the problem starts to come in. And sometimes you can do this really well if the core idea is transferable. So like the TV show The Office, it started in Britain and has been transported to all kinds of different cultures, because at the core idea of is let's make a comedy that's mockumentary style about the workplace, and that's a transferable idea to different cultures. But the nature of the characters shifted. So the British version, the lead character, David Brent, is very unlikable. He's selfish, but not in a way that he cares about other people. And so you don't like him, you're not rooting for him, though he's funny. When they first did the American version, they copied the pilot episode of the original. Michael Scott was very much just a transported David Brent copy. And when it went into the second season of the American version, they went, no, this doesn't match American taste. So they shifted that lead character to be much more likable. He actually loves his coworkers. He's just a dumb, selfish guy. So the central idea of workplace, incompetent bosses, and the weird dynamics of work, that's all still there. But things have changed a little bit in that you actually root for the main character, so it's hopeful and fun rather than cynical. So that transported over really nicely. And I think just with anime and the nature of it and the weirdness of it and not wanting, like I said with Death Note, you're not really rooting for Light because he's a good guy or something. There's no attempt to make him a good guy. It's just an interesting story, but he's not a hero at all. Well, Americans want a hero, and so they tried to make in the adaptation a hero out of it. And it's that sort of thing. It's the shaving off of the rough edges, smoothing it all out, putting that shiny American glossy shine on the whole thing. And it takes away what made the original, which was kind of the night dynamics of it. So that's kind of what makes it not work, and where I think there's a problem. And I don't think you can take Akira and make it for American audiences without making it not Akira anymore. You'll make a big, gigantic movie that won't appeal to a broad spectrum of American audiences because, it's weird. When I watched Akira for the first time, I walked in halfway through it, and there are big teddy bears attacking somebody, and then they get punched, and milk pours out of them. 5-10 minutes later, there's a gigantic amoeba attacking Neo Tokyo. I think that's what it's called. And it was weird. I was like, what am I watching right now? If you try and tell that story and make it so it's not weird to me, it stops being Akira. It stops being faithful, and it's like, why are we adapting this if we're not going to be faithful to it? So that's my take on it as the non-anime fan. How about you? Either tweet back at me if you're watching the YouTube version of this, put a comment. Why do you think it is that these don't work? Especially if you're an anime fan, you can have the perspective of the insider of what they keep doing wrong with these. But yeah, as the outsider, it just looks like they're trying to kind of average it and make them slightly less or slightly more American. It's a bad mix that does not work. So what do you think? Austin Wilcutt asks, with the worldwide box office of Cruise's The Mummy, do you think it could still get a sequel and continue with the dark universe thing Universal is attempting? Absolutely. I think it could get a sequel. I got the impression they were kind of all in whether it bombed or not. And its U.S. box office definitely would indicate they would question that. But they had to know before it was released that this thing wasn't going to be particularly well received in the U.S. I mean, they had to know it. I mean, just you could watch the movie and be like, this is weird. And still they announced Dark Universe. They took a picture 2-3 weeks before the movie came out with all the cast people. And when I say they knew before it came out, I mean they made announcements about future things within the month before the movie was released, in which case they could have seen it. They would have known the final product. They would have done test screenings to have an idea what sort of response they were going to get. And they still made these big announcements, even announcing the name The Dark Universe. That happened very shortly before the movie came out. And so then seeing that it made $400 million worldwide, I don't remember the exact box office, but I'm pretty sure it's under $150 million. So any way you kind of twist it, the movie's profitable. It made money. Not as much as maybe they want. Well, I mean, I don't even know, because, I mean, you say a movie called The Mummy that's kind of this horror thing makes $400 million worldwide. I hear that and I go, that's really good. I mean, I just don't imagine a movie called The Mummy being $1 billion franchise or anything like that. So that even seems like it can't even be that far below their projections or their highest hopes and dreams. I mean, imagine if 2 years from now, a Bride of Frankenstein movie comes out and makes $400 million worldwide. That sounds crazy to me, but that's kind of what the first movie in the franchise did. So absolutely, I think that they're going to move forward. $400 million seems like what they would have wanted for something like this. And I think they were just all in on this thing, kind of no matter what happened. They wanted to play this one out. All right, final question of the day. Damon Montoya asks, hey, Sean, in your opinion, where would you rank the Marvel Netflix shows among the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe? All right, so that one's a little bit tough to answer for the obvious reason that movies and TV are different. They don't compare. It's comparing apples to oranges. Apples and oranges are both fruits. There are some similarities, but there's some really big differences too. And so the criteria under which you evaluate them and what each of them can do makes it really difficult to do something like this in general. But I have a few thoughts. I would definitely put Iron Fist at the absolute bottom of between the Marvel, Netflix, and MCU. That's the worst thing to me is Iron Fist, the most incoherent and issues. And like, I still like it, but I also still kind of like Thor, The Dark World, which is my, I think, number 16, bottom of that ranking. So Iron Fist would be on bottom. And then I would look at Luke Cage and Jessica Jones as sort of the kind of brokenish type Marvel movies that have a lot of really good stuff in them, but a lot of issues as well. So probably around, if I had to, somewhere in that, not at cracking the top 10, but around Iron Man 3 and stuff like that, where people tend to find some enjoyment, but there's some issues with it. In particular, I guess to draw a real comparison with like Luke Cage and Iron Man 3, both of them kind of start out strong, and then there's some sort of twist that happens around halfway through, whether that's the Mandarin twist or Cottonmouth dying and Diamondback, I believe the guy's name, taking over as the main villain. Each of them have that plot twist, and it's not as strong as it used to be, and it kind of taints the overall experience. And so I'd put Luke Cage kind of right around Iron Man 3, Jessica Jones just a little bit above that. Where's the Defenders, right in the 8-9-ish area of stuff that's real solid, real good, some issues, doesn't fully bring it together. So that's where I kind of put those ones. And for me, Daredevil season 1 and 2 were the best of the Marvel Netflix seasons. So I'd have them pretty high up, and that's where it just gets really difficult to compare things. I wouldn't have a spot that I'd necessarily put them, but say that it's higher than, 7 or 8 or wherever that would be. So, somewhere around 5, maybe higher. But it's just so hard to compare because you're comparing 12 hours of content to a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. And there's goods and bads that come with each of those. And when you do something that long, a season is 12, 13, or in the case of Defenders, only 8, but 13 episodes, 13 things. And so if one of those things is bad, how do you compare that to the nature of a movie that's this well-constructed, tight object? So that's somewhat where things would go. Iron Fist at the absolute bottom. Luke Cage around Iron Man 3 in that, 10, 11 area. Jessica Jones around the 10-ish area. The Defenders around somewhere in that 7, 8-ish area. And Daredevil 5-ish, somewhere and above. Something like that. Anyway, that will do it for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, or if you're over on YouTube, not really watching, but you're listening on YouTube while looking at a picture of my face. Be sure to subscribe everywhere. If you're checking this out on the iTunes Store, be sure to rate it and review it. That's kind of how it helps me rank and get some traction over there. I would greatly appreciate it, but thank you guys so much, as always, for taking your time and listening to me talk about movies. It really does mean the world to you. Talk to you later.